English Campfire.
Picture this. It's 5:45 a.m. You are fast asleep in your own bed.
The best place to be.
Right. Exactly. The house is completely dark. It's perfectly still. And then suddenly a sharp, echoing bark just completely shatters the silence. You jolt awake.
Oh, the worst feeling.
It really is. Now, if it happens once, I mean, it's fine. A dog barks at a squirrel, you roll over and, life goes on.
Yeah, you forget about it by breakfast.
Exactly. But what happens when that single jarring interruption at 5:45 a.m. shifts from a random annoyance to a daily routine?
Well, it stops being just a noise at that point. Psychologically, it starts to feel like trespassing.
Right.
Like an actual intrusion into your sanctuary.
And that transition from a minor annoyance to this perceived violation, that is the entire focus of our deep dive today. We are unpacking a thoroughly documented case study of a suburban neighborhood dispute.
It's a fascinating one, too.
It really is. We've got the notes, we have the timelines, the mediation records of this conflict between two neighbors. We're going to call them Sandra and David. And our mission today is to break down the anatomy of this clash. We're going to explore how a completely mundane issue spirals into this massive territorial battle, and I think more importantly, the psychological mechanism of how it actually gets resolved.
Yeah, because to truly understand the escalation of this standoff, we really have to look at the clash of two very different ecosystems, basically, sharing a single property line.
Yeah.
I mean, this is never just about a dog barking. It's really a study in how we define our personal space, how we protect our peace, and how quickly human communication just breaks down when our routines are threatened.
Totally. So let's establish those two ecosystems for you listening. On one side, we have Sandra.
Right, Sandra.
She is in her early 60s. She's a retired school teacher who has lived in this exact same suburban house for 20 years.
Wow, 20 years.
Yeah, she is incredibly rooted. Over 2 decades, she's actually outlasted 3 different sets of neighbors next door. The most recent being this quiet, retired couple who basically just grew tomatoes.
Okay, so that means Sandra's baseline expectation for her environment is heavily skewed toward, predictability and silence.
Exactly.
She has spent 20 years curating a very specific living experience.
Right. And then enter David.
Ah, yes. David.
He buys the house next door. David is 34, he's a software engineer, and he works from home. But crucially, he often works late into the night.
Right, so his schedule is completely flipped.
Exactly. His entire circadian rhythm is inverted from the rest of the street. And David comes with a Labrador retriever named Biscuit.
And Biscuit is the one who unwittingly throws a massive wrench into Sandra's carefully curated ecosystem.
He really does, because Biscuit is the dog barking at 5:45 in the morning. And Sandra, possessing the observant mind of a former teacher, she doesn't just get annoyed, she collects data.
Of course she does.
Right. By Friday of that very first week, she has completely mapped this dog's routine. She notes that Biscuit barks at the recycling truck on Tuesdays and Fridays, and the lawn sprinklers the rest of the week.
It's so interesting because that concept of a routine, it's the invisible glue of any community.
Oh, for sure.
We all rely on these predictable rhythms to just function, But when David's routine, which is letting his dog out before he goes to sleep after a night shift, when that collides violently with Sandra's routine of sleeping until 7 a.m., we hit a fundamental friction point.
Yeah.
In sociological terms, David is basically forcing Sandra to absorb the negative externalities of his lifestyle.
I love that phrase, negative externalities. And Sandra feels that friction immediately, right? And she decides to act. But she doesn't knock on his door.
No, she doesn't.
Instead, she writes a note.
The classic note.
The classic note. It reads, let me quote it here. "Hi, I'm Sandra, your neighbor. I've been meaning to introduce myself. One small thing. Your dog barks quite early sometimes. Would it be possible to bring him inside earlier? Thanks so much." And then she ends it with a smiley face and a little hand-drawn picture of a sun.
Oh, wow. The quintessential soft complaint.
Yes.
It is such a fascinating cultural defense mechanism.
It really is, and I think we need to interrogate why we do this. Why do we mask our actual simmering frustration behind smiley faces and doodles?
Right.
It reminds me of those passive-aggressive sticky notes people leave on the office microwave.
Oh, absolutely. Please clean up your splatters, smiley face.
Exactly. We wrap a demand in the packaging of a friendly suggestion, assuming the other person will just somehow decode our true level of annoyance.
Well, we do it because human beings are deeply averse to direct social friction.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Especially in spaces where we are essentially trapped like an office or, in this case, a neighborhood.
Right, you can't just leave.
Exactly. So the soft complaint is an attempt to address an issue while maintaining plausible deniability of conflict.
Oh, that's a good way to put it.
You can always say, hey, I was just being friendly. Look at the sun I drew.
Right.
But the inherent flaw in a soft complaint is that it creates a massive vacuum of intent. It leaves entirely too much room for misinterpretation.
Which is exactly what happens here. David receives the note, and his response is, well, it's nothing.
Nothing at all.
For 5 agonizing days, there is total silence from the house next door. The dog keeps barking at the sprinklers, and David remains an absolute ghost.
And see, that silence from David, that breeds absolute paranoia.
Oh, I bet.
When you drop a hint, even a polite one with a sun drawn on it, and you hear nothing back, your brain abhors that vacuum.
You start making things up.
Exactly. You don't assume the person is just busy or forgot. You fill in the blanks with malicious intent. So Sandra's brain starts writing this entire narrative where David is arrogant, he's disrespectful, and he's intentionally ignoring her.
Right, he's the villain in her story now. So by the time we hit day 6, the tension is just suffocating.
Oh, I can imagine.
David finally walks over and knocks on Sandra's door. And according to the notes, he looks exhausted, he's super defensive, and when Sandra invites him inside to talk, he refuses. He stays planted right on the porch.
Okay, so keeping a literal and metaphorical barrier between them. He feels cornered on a neighbor's territory, so he won't cross the threshold.
And the conversation immediately derails. They don't talk about their schedules or their stress levels or anything productive. They just argue over facts.
Of course.
David defends his night shift lifestyle, insisting his dog needs outdoor time. Sandra counters with her timed logs of the barking.
Oh, the data collection comes out.
Exactly. And when David won't concede, Sandra plays a new card. She brings up the local noise ordinance, pointing out that municipal law prohibits loud sounds before 7:00 a.m.
Wow. Okay, so this is a massive shift in the dynamic.
Really? How so?
Well, by citing the noise ordinance, she isn't just complaining about a nuisance anymore. She is weaponizing the local government to force his hand.
Ah, I see.
She is officially moving the dispute from a neighborly disagreement to a legal boundary.
And she doesn't even stop there. When David pushes back on the ordinance thing, she brings up the homeowners association.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, she threatens to file a formal complaint with the HOA.
Which is a profound escalation in the language of suburban dynamics.
But wait, I want to challenge that slightly.
Sure.
Is going to the HOA really an escalation, or is it just practical? Like, if David is blowing off her notes and stonewalling her on the porch, shouldn't she use the structural tools she literally pays dues for?
That's a fair question.
Right. Why risk a screaming match on the front lawn when you can just let the organization handle it?
It seems logical on the surface. I completely agree.
Yeah.
But using an HOA to solve a neighborly dispute is kind of like calling a SWAT team to kill a spider.
Oh, wow, okay.
Yes, it might technically get the job done, but the collateral damage to your living environment is massive.
Because they have real power.
Exactly.
Yeah.
HOAs possess real, legally binding authority. They can levy fines, they can place liens on your property, they can actually threaten your financial stability.
Right, right.
So when Sandra threatens the HOA, she isn't just asking for a referee or a mediator. She is signaling to David that friendly resolution is completely dead, and she is willing to threaten his financial peace to get her way.
Wow. But that is a huge escalation. And the fallout from that threat is immediate. Because human nature dictates that when someone threatens your security, you don't apologize. You dig in.
You fight back.
Exactly. So Sandra officially files the bureaucratic grievance with the HOA, and David retaliates. He sends Sandra a new note, completely devoid of smiley faces this time.
No sundoodles either, I assume?
No sundoodles. And in this note, he specifically points out the exact property line between their yards.
Ah. Notice how quickly both of them abandon the actual problem here, which is just a dog barking at a truck.
Yeah.
And they retreat to these structural defenses.
Right.
Sandra uses the bureaucratic structure of the HOA, and David uses the physical legal structure of the property line.
Yeah, drawing a literal line in the sand.
Exactly. In American neighborhoods, the property line is the ultimate emotional boundary. By bringing it up, David is heavily implying the threat of trespassing. He is matching her bureaucratic weapon with a territorial one.
It's fascinating and kind of sad how quickly we outsource our conflicts to these structures.
It really is. It's a phenomenon we could call empathy outsourcing.
Empathy outsourcing, I like that.
Yeah, we pay HOA dues, we survey our property lines, we memorize municipal codes, all because we think these tools buy us freedom from uncomfortable conversations.
Right. We want a buffer.
We do. We treat our community like a subscription service where a customer support rep is supposed to handle the disputes for us. But all it really does is cause our social skills to atrophy.
And because their social skills have failed so completely here, the conflict spills over the property lines, literally.
Oh, there we go.
Enter Helen. She's the neighbor from across the street.
There's always a Helen.
Always. Helen has been watching this porch standoff from her window. She decides to get involved, and she starts circulating a neighborhood petition demanding action from the community about, quote, dogs in general.
Wow. Okay, so this is the bystander effect mutating into collective action, but applied in the clumsiest way possible.
It's incredible. We go from one dog barking at 5:45 a.m. to a neighborhood-wide legislative crisis.
It escalates so fast.
Right. Helen is like the gust of wind that makes this tiny spark jump the firebug. And the bitter irony here is that Sandra never wanted a neighborhood-wide crusade against dogs. She likes dogs. She just wanted to sleep.
But see, that is the inherent danger of involving the public in a private dispute.
Right.
Petitions function as blunt instruments of social pressure. They gather numbers to force conformity. The moment Helen starts knocking on doors, Sandra's specific interpersonal issue is entirely hijacked by the broader grievances of the community.
That makes total sense.
Helen isn't trying to solve Sandra's sleep problem.
Yeah.
Helen is using Sandra's conflict as a proxy war to air her own complaints about the neighborhood.
Yeah.
So the original human need gets completely buried under collective outrage.
So if you're listening, put yourself in this neighborhood right now. Half the street has signed a petition. Property lines are being weaponized. The HOA is investigating. Sandra and David are basically in a Cold War. And Biscuit is still barking at the sprinklers.
The dog doesn't care about the petition.
Exactly. So how on earth do you walk back from the edge of that cliff? You need someone to step in who isn't emotionally blinded by the entire situation.
You need a circuit breaker.
Yes, exactly. And luckily, the HOA actually recognizes the powder keg they're sitting on, so they suggest mediation.
Smart move.
Very. So Sandra and David find themselves sitting in a neutral HOA office across from Frank. Frank is this retired property manager who is acting as the mediator. And you can just tell from reading the transcripts that Frank has survived 1,000 territorial neighborhood disputes.
He's seen it all.
He really has.
And someone like Frank, he understands a fundamental truth about conflict resolution, which is that arguing over the facts of a dispute almost never resolves the underlying emotional injury.
And Frank totally flips the script here. He doesn't look at Sandra's data logs of the barking. He completely ignores Helen's ridiculous petition. He just looks at the two of them and asks one simple, piercing question. He says, let's start with what each of you actually needs, not wants needs.
Oh, that is brilliant. The psychology behind that specific phrasing is so effective.
Really? Why just changing want to need?
Well, when we are entrenched in an argument, we attach our entire ego to our positions.
Okay.
A position is basically a demand. So Sandra's position is, the dog stays inside. David's position is, I will use my yard whenever I want.
Right, they're completely opposed.
Exactly. And giving up a position feels like a humiliating defeat. But a skilled mediator like Frank, he digs underneath those positions to find the core interests or needs.
So by forcing them to articulate their needs, Frank is kind of stripping away the armor of the HOA and the noise ordinances and the property lines.
Yes.
He forces them to drop all the legal posturing and just look at the root human elements.
And when you strip away that ego, you so often find that the core needs aren't actually at war with each other.
Which is exactly what happens. The truth finally spills out. Sandra answers the question honestly. She just says, I need to sleep past 5:45 a.m. That's it. That's her only core need. And David answers, I need Biscuit to have outdoor time in the morning before I go to sleep, because if he stays cooped up, he gets severe anxiety and destroys the house.
See, and once those vulnerabilities are on the table, Frank does the most important thing a mediator can do. He looks at those two raw statements and asks them if they're genuinely incompatible.
It's the massive aha moment of the whole case study for me.
Yeah.
When you clear away the smoke of the retaliatory notes and the municipal codes, this wasn't a war between a bitter retiree and an entitled millennial. It was simply a mismatched schedule.
Just two conflicting routines. And identifying those compatible needs is the gateway to real compromise.
Right.
And true compromise isn't about mutual sacrifice where both people leave angry. It's about finding that specific overlap where both parties can fulfill their foundational needs, even if they have to adjust the mechanics of how they get there.
And the resolution they reach is beautifully, almost frustratingly simple. David agrees to keep Biscuit inside the house until 6:30 a.m., specifically on the days the recycling truck comes, which were the major trigger points anyway.
Right.
In exchange, Sandra agrees to drop the formal HOA complaints and stop monitoring his yard. They look at each other across the table and they shake hands.
So on paper, the dispute is closed. The structural conflict is resolved.
Done and dusted.
But, and this is crucial, the most precarious moment of any conflict is actually the hour immediately after the paperwork is signed.
Oh, really? Which brings us perfectly to the parking lot.
Yes.
So they walk into the HOA office, the mediation is officially over, and this incredibly vital human interaction takes place. David stops before getting into his car. He turns to Sandra and he apologizes.
Wow.
But not for the dog barking. He apologizes for the communication breakdown. He says, "I'm sorry I ignored your first note. I didn't respond because I thought you were being passive-aggressive."
Oh, that is so direct.
It is. And Sandra pauses. She actually reflects on her own behavior in that moment, and she admits, "I was, a little."
That is amazing. That parking lot exchange is the actual lasting resolution to the entire ordeal.
It's such a vulnerable moment, isn't it? Because Sandra could have easily thrown her walls back up. She could have defended her smiley faces and her sundoodles.
Right, she could have been like, I was just being nice.
Exactly. But she chose to take ownership of her part in the messy dynamic. She acknowledged that her soft complaint was heavily loaded.
And that vulnerability is really the only known antidote to a grudge.
A grudge.
We see this constantly in community dynamics. You can technically resolve a dispute. You can move a fence line, or you can change a dog's schedule. But if the emotional resentment isn't aired out, it metastasizes into a grudge.
And a grudge is exhausting.
It is. A grudge is essentially a deferred conflict. It is an emotional tax you pay every single time you pull into your own driveway.
Wow, an emotional tax. I love that. And grudges slowly assassinate the baseline common courtesy of a neighborhood, don't they?
Completely. They destroy the neighborhood wave. People stop making eye contact when they take the trash out. They cross the street to avoid each other.
Yeah, we've all seen that.
But by standing in that parking lot and actually acknowledging their shared communication failures, Sandra and David actively dismantled the grudge before it could take root in their daily lives.
And the tangible result of that vulnerability happens the very next Tuesday. The recycling truck rolls down the street. David brings the dog inside at 6:15 a.m. Sandra sleeps peacefully until 7 more a.m.
Perfect.
As the case study notes conclude, it wasn't a massive structural change, but in the nuanced language of a neighborhood, it was everything.
It was a minor logistical adjustment that represented a monumental shift in mutual respect.
Exactly. So let's pull back and look at the whole journey we just walked through today. We saw how the instinct to avoid friction, like ignoring a passive-aggressive sticky note, inevitably creates a vacuum that paranoia just fills right up. We saw the dangers of empathy outsourcing, where we use structural authorities like ordinances and HOA rules as weapons instead of, just talking to each other.
Right.
We watched how the bystander effect can turn a tiny micro issue into a proxy war for an entire street. And ultimately, we saw that real resolution requires bypassing our egos, focusing on fundamental needs, and embracing vulnerability.
It's a lot to unpack.
It is. So for everyone listening, I want you to think about your own ecosystem for a second. Think about the last time you felt your territory or your peace was violated by a neighbor or maybe a roommate or a coworker.
It happens to all of us.
It does. Did you retreat to a soft complaint? Did you leave a loaded note on the kitchen counter? Did you immediately look up the HR handbook or the lease agreement to prove you were legally right? Or did you skip all that and try to find out what the other person actually needed?
If we tie all of this back to the broader sociological picture we discussed earlier, it really leaves us with a critical question about how we live today.
What do you mean?
Well, we have never had more structural boundaries at our disposal than we do right now.
That's true.
We build higher fences, we draft stricter HOA covenants, we literally download apps to report noise complaints anonymously.
Oh yeah, those are everywhere now.
Right, we surround ourselves with rule books to protect our peace. But what if our heavy reliance on these structures is actually eroding our capacity for community?
Oh wow.
What if having an authority to report things to gives us a convenient, socially acceptable excuse to avoid the messy, uncomfortable, but profoundly necessary human skill of navigating conflict face to face.
That is a brilliant and honestly slightly terrifying thought to end on, because if we outsource all of our empathy and conflict resolution to the rule book, we might win the argument, but we lose the neighborhood.
Exactly.
So next time you hear a metaphorical or literal dog barking at 5:45 a.m., maybe resist the urge to draft a petition, skip the smiley face notes, leave the municipal code out of it. Just go have a messy, honest conversation.
It's worth it.
It will probably save you a deeply uncomfortable HOA mediation. Keep challenging your own assumptions, keep looking for the underlying needs in your conflicts, and keep digging into the dynamics of your own communities. We'll see you on the next deep dive.